And if you click on the thing there, you should still not be able to see me. It should still be waiting, right?
Yes.
It's still waiting? Okay, great. Anything change? Okay. It should not go live for another 15 minutes.
Yeah. So the live you do were you recording? Or you put on the
I think it saves it automatically. Me. Hello. Can you guys see me? No. Somebody comment if we're live. I'm figuring out how all this works still. There we go. There we go. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. So, this live stream is celebrating 1 year of this channel's founding. This channel was founded on April 6th, 2019, and since then, we've made 85 videos, which have altogether gotten over 18,000 views, I think, is what it showed. And honestly, I'm really proud of how far this has come, especially considering that a year ago, the quality of this looked like that, and now it looks like this. I think that this has come a long way. So, I'm pretty happy about that, and I wanted to do something to celebrate it. So, thank you all for joining us. A little bit of housekeeping. There's only a few people logged in right now. Go tell everyone you know to come watch. Give the stream a like, comment. I encourage you to go and use the chat box there. Post it on Twitter and all that if you want. And be sure to like the stream and subscribe if you haven't already. So what I think we're going to do today is I think we're going to do a Q&A. I got some questions from Twitter, from Instagram, from some of my viewers, and then if we have time after that, we're going to go and we're going to dissect some fascist propaganda. More specifically, about 5 minutes of Tucker Carlson's White Power Hour. And we're going to pick it apart and see all the places where he's stupid. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started then. And again, I encourage y'all to use the chat box. Talk to me, talk between yourselves, all that stuff, all that good stuff, right? All right, so my first question, it's what is the most important thing for Biden to do in January / what should Biden do in his first 100 days? All right, so first of all, I'm going to take this to mean whoever a new Democratic president is. I know that it's not 100% certain that Biden will be the Democratic nominee yet. It is, though, almost certain. At this point, Bernie Sanders would have to win every state that's yet to vote by a margin higher than he has won any state so far. So, it's very likely that Biden will be the Democratic nominee, but let's go ahead and assume this question means a new Democratic president. And by the way, if you live in Wisconsin, you are voting tomorrow, so don't forget about that. The most important things for a new Democratic president to do in their first 100 days, I'd say get the kids out of cages, close the concentration camps. That's having a negative impact on people's lives right now. It's killing people, it's hurting people, it's traumatizing children, and I think that's the very first thing that needs to be taken care of, especially since it can be taken care of like that. Just send an order to the Department of Homeland Security, and it'll take a little bit of time to implement, but the sooner you give them the order, the sooner they start to implement that. Of course, if the coronavirus is still happening by then you'll want to send out more PPE, start making more PPE, do all the things that Trump hasn't been doing, and you'll want to be able to you'll want to take care of that. But I think by January this will probably have gone past the worst of that. Another thing that I would say is important in the first 100 days is to order the FBI to investigate far-right extremist terrorism. Under the Trump administration, far-right extremist terrorism, white nationalist terrorism has not been a high priority for the FBI. In fact, they've deprioritized it. Meanwhile, far-right extremist terrorism kills far more people in the United States than Islamic extremist terrorism. It's by far the most terror incidents, and it's the least investigated. So I would say to order the FBI to start investigating that again. That's another thing that you could very easily do. Um, Re-enter the Paris Climate Accords. Climate change is maybe the most pressing issue of our time. Not only reissue into the Paris Climate Accords, but reissue all of the Obama era climate regulations, all the ones that Trump has revoked by executive decree, that have been revoked by the EPA and his appointees. And I would, of course, want far more to happen than just that regarding the climate, but that's a good start that can be very easily done in the first 100 days. That's the thing, is that 100 days is a very narrow window, relatively narrow window, and so I have to find things that are doable in 100 days, right? Next question is, how should a new Democratic president gain back the confidence of the rest of our world, especially allies? I would say that you have to show them that Trump is a blip, that all of this is a blip, that is not who we are. Do things like start negotiating with Iran to re-enter the Iran nuclear deal, into the Paris Climate Accords, of course, things like the TPP. And I would say go to them. Go to Europe, go to Canada, go to Britain and France and Germany and Japan and South Korea, and talk to them. Send your high-level people to talk to them and show them that this is a blip. Show them that you value them, that you value our relationship with them. And of course, I would say enacting democratic reforms is a big part of that. Small d democratic, democracy. I think that a lot of countries, even if we convinced them, even if we won, if a Democrat won this year, a lot of countries might still view this as something where Trump can happen. This is a place where Trump can happen now. And we're not going to get that past that without enacting democratic reforms, unless we do things like abolish the filibuster, stop voter purges, get rid of voter ID laws, things like that. Unless we stop all the voter suppression that's going on and revitalize this democracy so that people like Trump can't get elected anymore, then we're never going to prove to them that this is a blip. And that's what we need to do. All right. Will America ever lead the world after this? Is our next question. And this one kind of gets me in the core, right? You know, a few months ago, I was sitting there wondering if China will ever recover from the coronavirus. And now we're far worse than they are. And it's not even just that, it's all the damage that the Trump administration has done. And I think honestly, in the long run, the coronavirus is the worst of it, is the least of it. You know, the Spanish flu killed millions of people in the United States, and we were one of the hardest hit countries, and a few years later we've rebounded. So I don't really think that coronavirus is going to hurt us as much in the long term as much as some of the other things that Donald Trump has messed up. You know, we've had 4 years of withdrawing from the world, 200,000 dead of coronavirus. It'll probably be the Trump deficit. He added $2 trillion to the deficit, and might be about to go into one of the worst economic downturns of the century. So I can't predict. Our next question. Is New York City really out of control because of COVID-19? Do you think America could prepare better at the beginning? I don't know about out of control. I'm not there. I'm in California, so I can't say for sure if it's out of control. They are getting hit very hard. They've got, let's see what the most recent numbers here are. Excuse me. There we go. New York has 131,916 cases of coronavirus, 4,758 deaths. So they are definitely getting hit really hard. I don't know if I would say they were out of control. Andrew Cuomo's been doing a decent job trying to control it as best as he possibly can. And I guess that really depends on how you define out of control. But as far as do you think we could prepare better? Oh, certainly we could have prepared better. We could have, first of all, prepared it all. We could have started making PPE, started making ventilators, that's personal protective equipment, started making ventilators, started preparing field hospitals and preparing things like the USNS Mercy and Comfort, the hospital ships. We could have not cut the budgets of the CDC, the National Institutes of Health, and the Department of Health and Human Services. We could have not cut our foreign health aid. We could have not disbanded the Pandemic Response Unit of the National Security Council. So, of course, we could have prepared better. We could have prepared way better. Next question. Daddy or chips? I didn't get this one at first. Apparently, it's a reference to a British commercial from the 90s. So, let's just take a look at that real quick.
Sophie, what do you like best, Daddy or chips? Daddy or chips? Daddy or chips? Daddy or chips? Thanks, Mum. Thanks, Mum. Daddy chips.
Oh, hello, girls. McCain chips, Britain's most popular choice.
Chips.
McCain, you just can't help yourself.
So I guess the answer is supposed to be chips. All right. How can we decrease his airtime? Excuse me, this one came from Instagram, and I'm going to assume that you're talking about Donald Trump and his... I'm not sure if you're talking about all airtime or just his coronavirus briefings. CNN, NBC have already stopped taking his briefings live, so that's great. But I think that we have to give up on expecting journalists to hold him to account. Because the right has for so long degraded and lambasted the free press as the liberal media that now we've got the both sides brigade that's so afraid of being called biased that they'll defer to the right, that they'll, oh, well, you know, Donald Trump's tone really changed. Today he became the president. His tone changed, and 10 hours later he's back to, oh, I wasn't in any models, at least not that kind of models, he says. And we've got to stop expecting them to hold him to account. We've got to start creating our own media, and that's what I'm trying to do, but we've got to counter the right-wing propaganda infrastructure, not just Fox News, but Breitbart, Sinclair, Ben Shapiro, and Steven Crowder, and PragerU, and all OAN, all of the right-wing media infrastructure that is driving the narrative, that is so disciplined, that is so on message and turning out the base. We've got to create something to counter that. And that's why you should subscribe to the Lucretia Report. Same. In the comments, Rebecca Stoppel asks, as a young person with student debt, how confident do you feel about your ability to get through this recession? I do have student debt. Not as much as some people do. I was lucky in that, but still a lot. I think I'll be all right. I think I'll be all right. Yeah. Somebody asks, how do you feel about the Democratic convention being pushed to August? It makes sense for safety concerns, of course. I do worry, though, and of course they had to. They couldn't just act as if nothing was going on, right? But I already think that the primary season is far longer than it needs to be, that the general election season is far too short, especially when we're going up against an incumbent. This every day that we're fighting amongst ourselves is another day that Donald Trump is campaigning unchallenged. Is another day that Donald Trump has to fight back without anyone really pushing up against him. And so I think the general election season should be longer already. That's something I would like to change, but the idea that this is just going to make it even shorter is a little bit worrying to me. Maybe we'll only have one candidate still in the race by then anyway, and we'll have de facto been in the general election season for a while, and then maybe it's good to have the convention bump a little closer to the election. But if we are still campaigning in the primary right up to the convention, that's worrying to me. Honest feeling / best guess. Can we, i.e. the people, democracy, Democrats, win? Absolutely we can. We consistently get more votes than Republicans. It's only because of undemocratic institutions like the Electoral College and things like voter suppression that the Republicans ever win at all. So of course we can win. We have more support than them. All we have to do is organize that support better. And so I'll tell you what, if you're hearing this and you want to organize that support, go to votesaveamerica.com and they have ways that you can organize on there. Somebody asks, War of the Roses in 3 sentences. I don't know that much about the War of the Roses. I went and watched a YouTube video to try to get this, but so my 3 sentences are going to be: an English civil war started because everyone wanted to be king. This war had fully too much drama, and I'm pretty sure Bran ended up king in the end. Favorite leader in history, someone asks. So this depends. This varies on me about when you ask me. Like right now, I'm reading a book about Russia and the Napoleonic Wars, and so someone that I'm really into right now is Eugen Württemberg. He was a Russian general in the Napoleonic Wars, and I think he's very cool. I don't know that I would say he's my favorite leader in history, of course, though. But that's hard to say. My favorite president is FDR. I like Napoleon for basically inventing the modern state, creating meritocracy in Europe. He emancipated the Jews in Europe, creating all the institutions, a lot of the institutions at least, that we associate with a modern centralized state. A lot of those were created under Napoleon. Cincinnatus, a lot of people don't know who he is, but Cincinnatus was a Roman general who became the dictator of Rome, and that had different connotations back then. Back in Rome, dictators were someone that the Senate chose to be a temporary leader in like wartime and such. It was only when Caesar made himself dictator for life that changed later on. But Cincinnatus was made the dictator of Rome, and then after his dictatorship, he went back to just be a simple farmer on the land. He was retired. And so he's kind of a symbol. The moral of his story is something that appeals to me. He's kind of one of the earliest symbols of democracy. But I don't know if I could pick one. And the last question we have, who do you think will be the biggest upset in the Senate races? I think Kelly will win in Arizona. Would be great to see McConnell lose his seat. It would be great to see McConnell lose his seat. I don't think that's extraordinarily likely because it is Kentucky. That being said, Amy McGrath has been running an outstanding campaign, and she is doing far better than she has any right to be doing. So it's not out of the ballpark. I wouldn't bet on it. Kelly in Arizona, that's Mark Kelly, running against Martha McSally in Arizona. I wouldn't say he's an upset. I would, in fact, say that he's the favorite. Arizona is one of the closest Senate races, but Kelly is consistently leading in polls, consistently out fundraising Martha McSally, and Martha McSally ran for Senate in Arizona only 2 years ago and lost. the same exact voters that voted against Martha McSally 2 years ago are the same ones voting in this election now. Not to mention that Kelly is a war hero and an astronaut. So I don't know that I would say that Kelly would be an upset. In fact, I think he's the favorite. As far as which ones I think will be the biggest upset, though, there's two I've got knocking around my head. One is Jamie Harrison running against Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. South Carolina is not a blue state, and he's kind of like McGrath in the fact that he's running an extraordinary campaign and doing far better than he has any right to be doing in a place like South Carolina. But the difference is that Jamie Harrison has been leading in a lot of polls. In a lot of polls, Jamie Harrison has been doing better than Lindsey Graham. And so if Jamie Harrison won, which he might, I think that would be an incredible upset. Another one is Steve Bullock in Montana. Steve Bullock is running against Steve Daines, I think is the Republican incumbent's name. And until last month, I wouldn't have said that Montana was a likely win for us. But then Steve Bullock announced. And a couple things about that. He's the popular Democratic governor of Montana. So if anyone can win, if any Democrat can win the Senate in Montana, it's Steve Bullock. Also, 2 years ago, Montana voted for what was his name? The incumbent Democratic Senator John Tester. 2 years ago, Montana voted to re-elect Democrat John Tester, who was whose opponent was Trump-backed. And they have a history of ticket splitting. Montana's kind of proud of their history of ticket splitting. So it's very possible that Donald Trump and Steve Bullock could both win Montana, and I'm pretty excited about that. So that's all of the Q&A we've got. So what I want to do now, again, guys, if you're just tuning in, go ahead and give the stream a like and subscribe if you haven't. Also, consider supporting the channel on patreon.com/Lucretia Report. That really helps. That really helps us keep doing what we're doing. So thank you for that if you're a patron already. And if you're not, I know times are rough right now, but please consider going to patreon.com/Lucretia Report. Thank you. Hello, Ray Jolt 2. Alright, so this video is from Tucker Carlson's White Power Hour on Fox News, and it's called As U.S. Loses Jobs to COVID-19 Crisis, Government Issues New Work Visas. And this was from April 1st, which was last Wednesday. So this is only 4 minutes and 30 seconds, but there's a lot of stuff in here, so let's unpack some of this. Ready?
More than 3 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits the last week of March. That's more than quadruple the previous record in the history of the country. Yet in a matter of months, jobless figures like that, 3 million, could look small by comparison. Goldman Sachs estimates that later this year, America's unemployment rate could hit 15%. That would be the highest figure since the 1930s.
Yeah, it's almost as if we should have some kind of, like, I don't know, like a social safety net or something in place so that if a crisis like this happens, people aren't destitute. Just saying.
It's almost 25 million people out of work. And Goldman's estimate is not even the highest one. Economists at the St. Louis branch of the Federal Reserve Bank are projecting an unemployment peak as high as 32%. That's 47 million people out of work. In case you're wondering, that is worse than the worst year of the Great Depression. Much worse, actually. At some point, coronavirus will be gone, but unfortunately, we could live with the crushing unemployment numbers for far longer. And that's a disaster.
Please explain yourself there, Tucker. Because I don't get that. Probably unemployment will be higher than it was before, even after the coronavirus is gone. We might go into a recession. But the kind of unemployment numbers we're seeing right now, that's an aberration. They've never been that bad in all of history, and it's because of the shelter-in-place orders. because people can't go into work, people are being temporarily laid off. And after all these shelter in place orders are lifted, people will presumably go back into work, a lot of people, and so these numbers will significantly go down. So it doesn't really make sense to assume that we're going to have the same numbers of millions and millions of people still unemployed after coronavirus is over.
Disaster for people, for individuals, for families, but it's also a threat to the stability of our country. Nothing makes a nation more volatile than huge numbers of people who don't have jobs. That's always true. So we
half true. I'm going to go ahead and bring this up here. The stream keeps pausing. Is everyone else getting that also? Okay. So he says that nothing makes a country more volatile than large numbers of people who don't have jobs, and that's half true. Franklin Roosevelt said, "The man who is without a job and hungry, that's the stuff that revolutions are made of." But it's not really about jobs. It's about being able to provide for your basic needs, about being able to buy food, about being able to pay your rent. And we just usually associate that with having a job, but it's not really about the job. It's about people sustaining themselves. So again, it's almost as if we should have some kind of like a social safety net or something. I don't know.
We need to do whatever we can to prevent that from happening. But here's the amazing thing. The federal government is doing its best tonight to make it much worse. Here's how. Today, April 1st, the Department of Homeland Security released 20,000 new H-2B visas for seasonal guest workers to come into America and take jobs in industries like landscaping, food processing, and resorts.
Whoa, Tucker, okay. Okay, Tucker, so here's the thing about H-2B visas, as you say. Let's look right here on the USCIS, that's the U.S. Customs and Immigration Service. And you can see that where does it say it here? There we go. In order for an employer to get H-2B visas, and it's employers that apply for H-2B visas, they have to show that there are not enough U.S. workers who are able, willing, and qualified to do that work. They also have to show that the H-2B visas will not adversely affect working conditions and wages of U.S. workers. So where are the jobs taken? If there was no one in America who's going to take those jobs, whose jobs are they taking? Not to mention that these are temporary visas. These are for stays of less than a year. So it's not like this is someone who's going to come in and take a job and it's never going to be back, right? These are people who are going to come in and then soon later go. And whose job? They're not taking anyone's jobs anyway. I think Tucker's just assuming that people aren't going to look up these visas. Rachel 2 says, "My wonder is how will very small single-person businesses be able to keep afloat, especially ones in malls who have to pay thousands in rent." And that's why we might have a recession. And it's not just single-person businesses. Small businesses in general, the big companies, which are most of the companies getting bailouts, by the way, the big companies, they have liquidity. They have billions, trillions of dollars of cash. And they can get through this, but it's the restaurants, the small businesses that might go under, and that's a little bit scary. So we really should be doing more to support those businesses, and if you have the financial means right now, if you can, support local small businesses by doing things like ordering takeout food at restaurants and stuff. Because if all of those businesses go under, that's not going to be very good. Let me see a Republican who is willing to pour a slab in a 100-degree Texas heat. Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Another 15,000 visas will become available next month in May. Now, these are bonus visas, by the way. By law, the United
By the way, they do that almost every year.
States only has to offer 66,000 H-2B visas a year. But Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf has used his discretionary powers to add 35,000 extra visas.
Like I said, they do that almost every year. But another point, Chad Wolf is a Donald Trump appointee. Tucker is conveniently not mentioning that this is the executive branch that's making this decision, that this is Donald Trump's administration. Donald Trump picked Chad Wolf. So you can't on one hand say, be fawning over Donald Trump all the time like Tucker is, and on the other hand, be saying, how crazy is it that this Chad Wolf guy, who even picked him?
So that's a total of 100,000 workers coming to this country to take jobs during the single biggest unemployment crisis in a century.
So all the things we said about H-2B visas, first of all. Second of all, this is a common narrative I hear on the right, is that immigrants take jobs, right? Everyone's heard that they took our jobs. But that's not founded in fact. Immigration is just a form of population increase, right? And if population increase led to job loss, we would have higher and higher unemployment numbers every year. Because our population has gone up every year. The world's population has gone up every year, and we're included in that. But the fundamental problem that they find here is that they act as if the economy is a set size. That here's how big the economy is, and it can't get any bigger. And if you take a little bit of the economy, if you take a job, that's a job that an American doesn't have right now. But that's not how that works. The economy grows, and people make the economy grows. When immigrants come in here, they pay rent, they buy food, they go to the movies, they spend money, they work and make money and pay taxes and then spend that money. And that grows the economy. The number one driver of the economy is consumer spending. That's why the economy is slumping right now, is because no one is spending money during this pandemic. The number one driver of the economy is consumer spending. And having more people means more consumer spending, which means more jobs. So really, immigrants create jobs, don't they? I mean, in 1900, the U.S. economy was $0.59 trillion. Now, it is $19.39 trillion. The economy grows. And that's not even to mention that 101,000 is only 3% of the 3.3 million people who filed for unemployment just, what was it, last week? So it's a drop in the bucket. Even if they were taking jobs, which they're not, it's a drop in the bucket. Tucker probably thinks enough time to have babies, which is kind of true, but would they really? Oh, that's another thing. I talked about this in a video, actually. So attempts to increase birth rates, and U.S. birth rates have been going down consistently, but attempts to increase birth rates are almost never successful. Because having a kid is a really big life decision, and it's hard to convince someone to make that big of a life decision with a poster or a YouTube video, right? What does increase birth rates, though, is things like universal health care, universal paid family leave, universal child care, things that don't make having a baby such a big financial burden. That does raise birth rates. But the same people who talk about birth rates, and that's usually is a dog whistle for white supremacists, because usually when they talk about birth rates, they're talking about white birth rates. The same people who talk about all that, they oppose all those social programs. And imagine the countries who depend or the like on people vacationing and sightseeing there. Oh yeah. A lot of people are going to be hurt by all this. Seasoning cook and clean. Yeah, Rebecca Stoppel says they are working at Trump's properties during peak season to cook and clean illegal immigrants. Yeah, what has Donald Trump Mar-a-Lago has had how many illegal immigrants working there? It's hypocrisy. Oh, the classic news anchor spin. All right, let's carry on.
Meant it. And yet it gets worse than that. Yesterday, DHS notified 85,000 new winners of the H-1B visa.
All the things I said about the H-2B, they also apply to the H-1B, and he's also going to mention the H-2A later. All those things apply to that. Those are all temporary visas where you have to prove that you're not displacing American jobs.
Lottery. Today, those winners can begin filling out their full visa applications for jobs that will begin in October. That's just when unemployment could be at its peak and coronavirus could be making a comeback as the weather cools.
The idea that coronavirus is linked to the weather is both not proven, and there's not really much evidence for it at all. That's just something Donald Trump said one day, but it was supposed to be over by April, right? It's April right now. I mean, just look at as the weather has gotten warmer, how many new cases we've got. There are 364,885 cases in the United States right now. More people in the United States have died of coronavirus than in the Iraq War, in the Afghanistan War, and in 9/11, all combined, plus some more. As the weather has gotten warmer, all that's happened. So the idea that as the weather gets cooler or gets warmer, that's going to affect the coronavirus isn't really founded. I think I heard that in order to kill the coronavirus, you actually need like 120 degrees or something. And maybe in Arizona a couple times in the summer it'll get that hot, but in most parts of the country and the world, it'll never get that hot.
The forecasts. H-1B visas are supposed to allow companies to hire foreigners with extraordinary skills that simply don't exist in the American workforce. It's a fraud, of course, a well-documented fraud.
He says it's a fraud, of course, a well-documented fraud, and then fails to provide any sources for that documentation. You can't just say something is well-documented and not even attempt to give us some of that documentation. This is just assuming that Tucker Carlson's viewers will be like, yeah, that sounds right. It's confirmation bias. They're like, yeah, that's something I know already. It's just relying on confirmation bias. Let me just check the bit. I'm going to try to finish this up quick before my camera battery dies.
In practice, the visas are used to import tens of thousands of tech workers from India so Silicon Valley can profit from a cheaper workforce.
By the way, a lot of people don't realize just how big India and China is, which is why most visas come from India and China. India and China together make up 40% of the world's population. They're both at around 1.4 billion people. We're at about 325 million, and we're number 3. Almost half of all people in the world are from India and China, and the gap between second and third place is over 1 billion people. They are enormous countries.
Nothing against the workers, but they're taking jobs that would go to Americans. The big winners in this scheme are companies like Apple, Google, and IBM, which take in hundreds of H-1B workers every year. At many companies, including AT&T, as we chronicled recently on this show, American workers are ordered to train their foreign replacements and then fired once they're no longer useful.
Now, I had to look that up because I was sitting here thinking that this is probably just something Tucker's saying that's not actually true, or at least he's not looking at some of the nuance, but it actually is true. AT&T did get in trouble for having people train people who were going to replace them, and it was mostly immigrant workers. But that does raise the question, wasn't that what the Trump tax cuts were supposed to stop? Weren't the Trump tax cuts supposed to save American jobs and make sure that immigrants weren't taking our jobs? You know, AT&T got $3 billion a year cut from their taxes. Google, which he had on the thing, saved $1 billion a quarter. That's $4 billion a year. Apple saved $47 billion a year. And IBM, despite making $500 million in profit last year, got a $342 million tax refund. You pay more taxes than IBM does because of the Trump tax cuts. And wasn't exactly what Tucker is talking about here? Isn't that what all that was supposed to stop?
It's been going on for a long time. It's always been disgusting. But now it's a threat to our country, and that's not an overstatement. In a year where tens of millions of Americans could be looking for work, our government is importing more than 150,000 workers from abroad. And that's without counting thousands of H-2A agricultural workers who will be coming as well. The president needs to stop this from happening, and he can. If President
Yeah, he can. Donald Trump can stop this from happening. And Tucker conveniently forgets to mention why Donald Trump can. He'll mention some U.S. code in a second. But the crux of it is that this is Donald Trump's administration. At the end of the day, this is the decision of Trump appointees. Tucker just obviously forgets to mention that, right?
Obama was able to ignore existing immigration law and create DACA, and he did.
The courts would disagree with you on that. Also, that's not how laws work. Making a new law isn't ignoring old law, it's making a new one. Republicans, at least the ones I know personally, are accept that illegal immigrants aren't paying taxes. Do you have a link to that information page? Our Republican government. What information? Are you talking about the USCIS information page? That is, I just Googled H-2B visas, and then USCIS has an information page on every type of visa. So you can just go to their website. That is uscis.gov. I'm assuming that's the information page you're talking about. Oops. All right.
Then certainly the current president has the power to cut legal immigration in order to protect the nation. And in fact, American law gives him explicitly this right. Here it is. This is from Section 1182F of Title 8 in the U.S. Code. Quote, whenever the president finds that the entry of any aliens or of any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may make proclamation, and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem appropriate, end quote. It's very clear. And the Supreme Court just affirmed this law 2 years ago in the case of the president's travel ban. So it's real. Now, that ban, you'll remember, was levied to protect Americans from terrorism.
Okay. So the travel ban was to protect Americans from terrorism. I guess that's what they have to tell the courts, right? But let's ask Donald Trump about that.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
Was it really about terrorism? Let me give you some numbers. So the first iteration of the travel ban, and there have been, I think, three iterations of the travel ban. The first iteration of the travel ban included Iran, 99.4% Muslim, Libya, 98% Muslim, Somalia, 97%, Sudan, 97%, Syria, 87%, Yemen, 100% Muslim, Iraq, 98% Muslim. In the second iteration, he added North Korea, Venezuela to be the cursory non-Muslim countries because the courts turned down his travel ban, his Muslim ban. The courts rejected his Muslim ban, saying that it was biased, that it was religious discrimination. That's the words I'm looking for. And he had to add Venezuela and North Korea, which are not Muslim but also not white. He had to add those countries to get it past the courts. He also, along with North Korea and Venezuela, added Chad, which is 55.7% Muslim. In the third iteration, he added Tanzania, 80% Muslim, Nigeria, 49% Muslim, and where there's a lot of violence between Muslims and Christians, and Muslims would be likely to seek asylum. Kyrgyzstan, 86.3%, Eritrea, 36% Muslim, Myanmar, which has a relatively small percent Muslim population, but where there's a genocide actively happening against the Muslims, and so they would be likely to seek asylum or refugee status. But between all the countries that are listed in this travel ban, let's look at how many incidents of terrorism in the United States, how many people in the United States have been arrested or killed in relation to terrorism because, or of people from these countries. How many terrorists have been arrested or killed? 4. One person from Iran in 2006, one person from Nigeria in 2009, and 2 people from Somalia in 2010 and 2016. So 4 people, and every other country in the travel ban is 0. So 4 people from all these countries over the last 14 years have come to the United States to commit acts of terror. And actually, most of them came to the United States far before they decided to commit acts of terror. But let's look at some countries not listed in the travel ban. The same number, 1 person from each of Guinea, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Kuwait, Ethiopia, and Lebanon. 2 people from Russia, from Egypt, and from the UAE. 3 from Pakistan. And here's the big one, 16 from Saudi Arabia. And that's not even just... I can't remember if that's the 9/11... That's the 9/11 hijackers plus a few, because... what is it, like 14 of the 9/11 hijackers were Saudi? So the vast majority of people coming from the Middle East who have committed acts of terror in the United States have not been from countries that are listed in the travel ban. And in fact, the vast majority of Islamic extremist terrorism in the United States was committed not by foreigners, but by Americans. And the vast majority of terrorism in the United States was not committed by Muslims, but by white far-right extremists. So if his travel ban is trying to protect people from terrorism, it's doing a terrible job of it. Oops. North Korea, the country I like to call basically prison, the country. Oh yes, and have you heard that they have 0 cases of coronavirus apparently? Actually, what I think it is 1 o'clock 1 o'clock 1 case, 1:15 0 cases, 1:30 1 case, 1:45 0 cases. I'm actually going to be working on a video about that's related to North Korea, but you'll hear about that later.
But now we're facing an immeasurably greater crisis than terrorism. We're facing a global calamity that could wreck our economy, fracture our society, because that's always a byproduct of it, erode our rights, shatter our institutions, transform this country into a poor country, a has-been ex-superpower beholden to China. That could happen. Preventing that from happening is the most important test this president or any president in our lifetime will face. The time to placate corporate interests looking for low wages at all costs has passed. We need to stop this.
Yeah, I actually agree. It is time to stop placating corporate interests looking for low wages at all costs. But first of all, then why do you keep supporting the party and the president who is trying so hard to placate corporate interests? Also, courtesy to Vox for this, but let's listen to what you had to say a couple years ago, Tucker.
You're about the most unordinary person I know. You're an elitist. You're an asshole.
No. But see, I'm an out of the closet elitist. I don't run around pretending to be a man of the people. I'm absolutely not a man of the people at all.
Yeah. Tucker Carlson is the heir to the Swanson Frozen Foods dynasty. He is a millionaire. He was a millionaire before he got on Fox News and became even more of a millionaire. He is a millionaire funded by billionaires who pretends to be a man of the people, but he's not. So, let's look at some themes for all of what we just watched. First of all, immigration does not cause unemployment. We established that. That is the right wing's dog whistle, their excuse for not wanting immigrants in this country. And at least Donald Trump has stopped the euphemisms. At least he doesn't try to say, well, he does try to say this, but at least he tells us what he really thinks, and he tells us that he thinks Mexicans are criminals and rapists. At least we know what they really think now. Not that we ever didn't. Second of all, if you really don't want to become a has-been superpower, placated to China or whatever you said, immigrants will help with that. Not only will they expand the economy like we talked about already, but also if we're going to maintain our status, we're going to need them because like I said, our population growth is slowing and we're already way behind. Our chief geopolitical rival in the next couple of decades is going to be China. And China is the biggest country in the world. They can bring to bear the resources of 1.4 billion people. And if we are going to compete with that, we're going to need more people, and the only way that we can practically do that is with immigration. Not to mention that as baby boomers retire, we're going to need more people in the workforce, like immigrants, to support their Social Security, their Medicare, because those programs were made based on the assumption that no generation would ever be bigger than the one that comes after it. But in this case it is. We're going to need immigrants to support those programs or else they're going to collapse. But what's the reality here? The reality is that Tucker Carlson doesn't care. His whole point is not really about, is not really about the economy. It's about that he doesn't want brown people in his country. He doesn't care. He doesn't really care about losing jobs. You know? He'll be set for life no matter what. He's a millionaire. He's a multi-millionaire. He doesn't want brown people in the country is the real problem. He's called immigrants dirty. He said that they bring disease. He's called Iraqis and Muslims uncivilized little monkeys. He said that immigrants will make the country poor and that they're destroying the fabric of American life. But at the same time, where do we want immigrants from? Of course, we want more immigrants from places like Norway. Why don't we get more immigrants from places like Norway? How is Norway different from all the immigrants coming from El Salvador and Guatemala and all that? Gee, I wonder. You know, people act like it's a coincidence that all the Nazis, that all the Ku Klux Klan and all the white supremacists support the Republicans. People act like it's a coincidence that the Christchurch shooter and the El Paso shooter went to go try to kill Muslims, and the Poway shooter, I think, went to go try to kill Muslims and Jews and immigrants, brown immigrants, went to go try to kill these people and said that they were inspired by Donald Trump and the Republican Party and people like Tucker Carlson. That's not a coincidence. Tucker Carlson is the embodiment of a dog whistle. And sometimes he doesn't even bother with the dog whistles. None of this is really about the economy. It's about race. And don't let him fool you. Basically, we don't want to be Japan. Norway has socialism, yeah. And whenever people use the word socialism, I want to be clear, whenever people say socialism in the modern political context, they very rarely are talking about like Marxist-Leninist, the classic forms of socialism where you have state control of the means of production, distribution, and exchange. In reality, they usually mean like social democracy. Bernie Sanders isn't really a socialist. He's more of a social democrat. But we don't really have the word social democrats in America. It's much more common in Europe. But that's something that they're not really Marxist-Leninist socialists, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah. What did you guys think of that? I thought that was a lot. But this is the kind of thing that people on Fox News are watching every day. Not just Fox, OAN, Sinclair, all that. They're watching this every single day. And when people are only watching Fox News and their only source of information is what we just get watched, and they don't have someone live fact-checking it, it's pretty easy to see how people would fall into these rabbit holes. So do your best when you see things like this. Do your best to try to dispel the myths, dispel the lies. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to counter that. We're going to try to create a media apparatus that can do at least some, that can fix at least some of the damage that the right-wing media apparatus is doing. So if you haven't already subscribed, give the stream a like, subscribe. Thank you. And Ray Jolt 2 says, interesting breakdown. Thank you very much. But yeah, give the stream a like, go ahead and subscribe, because we just finished a year of trying to fight back against the right-wing media apparatus, and we've grown substantially. My first 100 subscribers took like 4 months, I think, and in the last month I got that many. More than that many, in fact. But we've still got a long way to grow, and we're going to try to do as much good as we possibly can as we go into this